Choose what you want to learn in 2024 and aim to complete at least 90% of the course in the next 90 days. And if you do that, you get back 90% of what you paid for the course. We believe you can do that. Now all you got to do is commit to your success. Commit with Geeks for Geeks.
Is my screen visible? Yeah. So let's start. So firstly, we will take a look at the what we will be learning in this session. So these are the specific points which we will be following within this course series to learn. So I will be giving you introduction to each of them one by one. So first is the introduction to the REST APIs, in which we will go through the what is REST API, what exactly it is, and how we can use this REST API for building the project and all that stuff. Then the next comes the introduction to the Retrofit library, which we will be using to make the API calls for the REST API, such as for getting the data, posting, retrieving, and all that functionalities. Then the next comes is the advantages of using the Retrofit library. So why we are selecting the Retrofit library to make the API calls within our Android application, even though there are many other libraries which are currently available in the market. What we are exactly looking at the Retrofit library. Then next comes is the demo of the application, which we will be building within this course session. So we will be basically building a wallpaper application. I will give you a complete demo to it, like how we will be building it, and what exactly will be the output and how the application will looks like. Then comes the part where we will be creating the Pixels API key. So basically, for building the wallpaper application, we will be using the Pixels API. For that, using that API, we will have to create the API key, which we'll use to authorize that network calls. So for that, we will be creating the API key for our Pixels API. Then last comes is the overview for the API, which we will be using. So we will be basically taking a look at the response of the API, which we will be using within our application. Everyone is clear up to this one, like what we will be learning within this session, then we can proceed further. If you are having any doubts, then please let me know. I think everyone is clear. So now we will move towards the first part of our section for today's section, that is introduction to the REST API. So firstly, what is basically an API? API is basically an application programming interface, and which is a way in which two computers talk to each other, where one computer will have the conversation with another one. It may be a web server or a service which will provide us a data. For example, API is basically in API, what happens is that one computer makes the call to the another computer to request some data or some images or any kind of a media file, and the another computer accordingly responds to that request. It might provide him a valid response or a error or something which the first computer does not pass to that computer. So that will be the REST call. So basically, what is REST? The full form of REST is the Representation State Transfer API. It is the most common use for the mobile web application is REST APIs, and it stands for the Representational State Transfer APIs. So basically, there are different types of APIs such as the GraphQL and others, but we will be focusing currently on the REST APIs, which are widely used for building the mobile application as well as web servers. So these APIs are basically used to fetch the data, post the data, or basically used to communicate with the database and read or write the data to the database. So we will be using the REST APIs in our current project for building our wallpaper application. Now we will take a look at the different methods which are used by REST APIs to make the network calls. So for making the network calls using the REST APIs, different types of methods are present. The first one is the get method. The name itself told us that this method is basically used to get the data from the web server or a database. So basically what this method does is the when we are making any API calls or a network calls, we will have to call this get method, which will basically get the data from our server. So for getting the data, this methods we have to simply specify some parameters or some URLs to or some authentication token to get the data from our web server, which is already present. Then next come is the put request. The put request is basically used to update the data which is existingly present in the web server. So what does it means that if there is a database and the data is already residing in that database. So if we have to update the data within that database or we have to modify that data, in that case we will use the put request to modify or update the data within our database or a web server. Then next come is the post request. So post request is basically used to add the new data or a new entry within our database or a web server. So if we have to add a new data, like for example, there is a database in which the data for the students is present, and if we have to add the new student in our database, in that case, we will be using the post method to add the data to our database. And the last comes is our delete method. So delete method, the name itself told us that it is basically used to delete the data from our web server or a database. So basically these are the four different methods which are used to perform the various operations using the REST APIs. It is also called as a CRUD, that is create, read, update, delete. There are different types of applications which are created with the help of these APIs. In most of the applications, we can get to see use these types of APIs, and in our current application, we will be focusing mainly on the get request because we will be mainly getting the data from our web server. Will we will be fetching the data for the wallpapers along with the images and all that stuff within our application. Now moving towards the next section, like introduction to the Retrofit library. So Retrofit is basically a networking library within an Android, which is used to simplify the process of making the network calls and network requests in Android applications. So Retrofit is basically developed by the Square, which is a company and this library is built on the on top of OKHTTP. This library is seamlessly integrated with the Android built-in tools and components, which makes it powerful and flexible for handling the HTTP request. Along with the Retrofit, there are several other libraries present in the market for making the API calls for Android applications such as Volley and others, but mostly uses Retrofit because it is having the various advantages to over the other libraries. So now we will talk about the working of the Retrofit library, what exactly it does. In the Retrofit library, for making the network calls, we will be using the Retrofit libraries class and the methods. Will be the callback function, which will basically return us the response or error accordingly. So firstly, within our mobile application, we will in our mobile application we will pass some parameters or a base URL and head and make the API call to our web server by passing the appropriate parameter. If the request which we send to the server is valid or having the proper validation or data, then server will accordingly respond us. There will be the two callback functions, that is on error and on response. If we get a if the server returns us the proper response, then it will be displayed in the on response method, and if the server returns an error, then error method will be called. So in that case, we will be using the retrofit library to read the data from our web server with the help of a get method. So in this way, we will be using the retrofit library. Now we will be moving towards the advantages of using the retrofit libraries over the another libraries for network calls in the Android. So the first advantage is the type safety request. So retrofit basically generates the type safety API calls, which means that the response which we will receive will be automatically converted into the Java objects, which will reduce the chance of the runtime errors. So APIs return the response in the various formats such as XML, JSON, and other. But the mostly used formats in the industry is the JSON format, which is also called as the JavaScript object notation format. So basically, JSON format, in most of the cases, while fetching the data within our Android application, we will receive response in the form of JSON. So to extract the data and display it accordingly within our application, we will use the JSON serialization. So for that, type safety requests are required. So which will automatically convert the response which we received from our API into the Java objects. So that will reduce our chance of runtime errors. So that is very much helpful for us to reduce the errors within our application. Then the retrofit library is very easy to integrate within our Android application because it supports multiple data serialization format such as JSON, XML, and others. So it becomes easy for integration of the REST APIs within our application. Now comes the another feature of the retrofit library, that it supports the declarative API, which means that the when we have to make any API call, in that case we have to pass an annotation for that method, whether it might be a get request, post request, put request, or delete request. So it becomes very easy to identify what exactly the method will call, whether it might be a post request, delete, or put. So it will be easy to manage as well. It will be easy to manage the methods within our application for the API calls. Then last comes is the asynchronous API calls. What exactly this means is that asynchronous means that it will be run in the background thread and will not affect the main thread. So what this means is, like, if we are making any API call within our application, and if the server is taking too much long time to respond us, in that case our application should not get stuck at that point, and it may continue forward. So in that case, asynchronous API calls does is what it does is that it will make the API calls on the background thread and prevent the main thread to block, so that application will run seamlessly without the blocking of the main thread. So these are the advantages of using the retrofit library. If anyone having the doubt up to this one, then they can add a comment. Now we will be taking a look at the next section. Now we will be taking a look at what we will be learning within this session and what type of application we will be going to create, that is wallpaper application. So let's have a look at the application. So now my screen is visible. On my screen, we will get to see the wallpaper application. So this type of wallpaper application we will be going to create inside this. So first is here are the different types of wallpapers which we will be going to display, and then comes are the different categories on the basis of which we will be filtering our wallpapers. So these are the different categories and these are the different types of wallpapers. According to category, we can change the types of wallpapers. So for example, if I want the wallpapers of nature, we can get the wallpapers for the natures only. Then for architecture, so these categories are on our basis, we can modify it according to requirement. So for music, we can add this type of wallpapers, and for abstract and others. Apart from that, we will be also taking a look on adding the search wallpapers functionality, so that user will be able to search the wallpapers according to his requirement. So for example, I want to search the wallpaper for computers. Then I will simply click on search. So we can get to see the wallpapers for the computer specifically. So in this way, we will be creating our wallpaper application. Now the part comes is that the setting the wallpaper. So I will be simply selecting any wallpaper. Then we have to simply click on set wallpaper option. So this wallpaper will be set to our home screen. So in this way, we will be creating the wallpaper applications. So inside this wallpaper application, firstly we will be have to create the search bar. Then comes our the category carousel bar. So and this will be our recycler view, and the last one in which we will be displaying our wallpapers will also be a recycler view, but it will be in the grid layout manager format. So in this way we will be creating a wallpaper application. This will, so basically what this application does is, this application uses the Pixels API on the background to render all the wallpapers from the Pixels website and display that wallpapers within our applications. And inside our application, we will be using these wallpapers to set the wallpaper to the device home screen. So for making this API call, we will be using the Retrofit library and we will be using the API from the Pixels website. So in this way, we will be creating the wallpaper application. For building this application, we will be using the two APIs. So the first API will provide us the data related to the wallpapers for the default page, like it is not present and there is no category present. And when there is a category, when we have to specifically filter out the wallpapers on the basis of category or the search query, in that case we will be using the different API. So we will be using two APIs to make the API calls and get the wallpapers within our application. So if anyone is having doubt regarding this, then they can drop a comment. If everyone is clear up to this, then we will move towards creating the authentication token for using the Pixels API, and we will take a look at the how will be the response of our API. So now we have to firstly navigate to the website called pixels.com, which you can see on my screen. So this site basically provides us the wallpapers and all that stuff. So we will be using the wallpaper from this website, and we will be displaying that wallpapers within our application through the API calls. So for generating the authentication token for fetching the wallpapers from this website, we have to simply log in. So for that, we have to simply click on join, then log in. Then we can log in with your email and password. I will be continuing with the Google account. So now we can get to see that I have logged in on my account, and here we can get to see the different types of features, like which we are currently not using it. We will be simply creating the API key which we will be using to authorize our network calls for this website. So for that, we have to simply go to our accounts tab. Then we can get to see option for image and video API. We have to simply click on that option, and here it will tell us that start building application with the help of pixels. So as you click on the your API key, we will get to see the API key. Then we will go to the documentation. We will also go to API key. So this is our API key which we will be using it. I am copying it. Then we will navigate to the documentation. So this API key will be used to authorize the network calls which we will be making from our application to the Pixels website. If this authorization is correct, then only we will get the response, and otherwise condition we will be getting the error. Now we will be navigating to the documentation to take a look on which APIs which we will be using within our application. So now let's take a look at the APIs which we will be using. So in the documentation, we will get to see different types of APIs, but we will be specifically focusing on the photo resource API and the search for photos. We will be specifically using search for photos API and the curated photos API. So search for photos API is basically used to search the photos, and curated API is basically used to get all the photos which we will be displaying on our very first screen. So firstly, we will be taking a look at the curated photos APIs. So this is basically the curl for the curated photos APIs. We will have to simply copy this curl Then we have to navigate to the Postman application. Inside the Postman application, we have to simply click on import. Then we have to paste the copied data and our API has been inserted. Here we can get to see we have to make the GET request as it will return us the. After copying this, we have to simply navigate to the file for the Postman, then click on import, and we have to paste our call here, and our API has been imported. So inside this API call, we will get the all the wallpapers, that all the curated wallpapers. We can also add the parameters to it. So first is the per page. We will only get one wallpaper in this case. So for getting the 30, we will be passing it as a 30, and we will be adding the page also as 1. So here inside this API, we can get to see as it is a get call. Then we have to add the query parameters for this API, that is per page, which is 30, and in one page we will be getting only one. We will be getting only one page which will consist of 30 wallpapers. Then we have to simply hit the send button. So this will make the network call to the Pixels website, and it will provide us with the data for all the wallpapers. So this is basically the 30 wallpapers data. We can also have a look of the each of single one. So I will simply copy this raw JSON data. Then I will navigate to the JSON formatter. Inside that, I will paste it and click on process to process this data. Now we can get to see the data in the proper JSON format. So inside this, firstly is our JSON object, which will consist of the 5 different fields. First is a page, per page, which we are specifying in our API call as a query parameters. Then comes is the array of photos, which will consist the 30 photos. Then the total results and the next page call. So inside this photos array, there is the different object, 30 objects, which consist of the each photo. So in the first object, we will get to see the details for the photo, such as the ID for that specific photos. Then what will be the dimensions for that photo, its height, its width, and the URL for that photo. Along with that, it will provide us a name for the photographer who has captured that photo, then the image of the photographer who has captured that photo. Along with that, we will get to see the ID for photographer, then color, then is it liked or not, and alternate tags. And now to get the image URL for the specific photo, we have to navigate to this source JSON object, and inside this source JSON object, we will get to see the image URLs, but in the different format. So first is the original format, then comes the large 2x size format, and these are the URLs for the different size format. So for example, if we want the image in the original format, we have to use this URL. So I will simply copy this URL and open this inside this new tab. So we will get to see this image. This will be the first image. Similarly, this will be the 2x size image. This will be the large size image. So I will copy the large size image. So this will be the URL for large size image. Similarly, this will be the small, tiny, and other size images. We will also take a look at that as well. So basically, the response provides us the images for the different sizes. We will use accordingly we require. So this is the details for the first image. Similarly, there are 30 different images, and the URLs for each image is also present in the same. So we will be using this response to display the wallpapers within our application. Now this will be the first API which we will be using. So I will also demo you through the application. Inside the application, we can get to see. So inside this page, we will get to see the different types of wallpapers which are not currently filtered through category. But when we load the application for the very first time, it will load the wallpapers. In that case, we will be using this API to get the response. So this API will provide the response for this default page, which is not filtered with the category. In that case, we will be loading the wallpaper from that specific API which we have just seen. Now we will take a look at the second API, which is the search for photos API. So we will click on that. We will simply copy the C URL, go to the Postman. Inside this, we have to simply click on new, then import our C URL, and our C URL has been imported. Here also we will be making the per page as 30 to get the 30 wallpapers for that specific category. And here we can get to see in the query parameter, they are passing it as a nature. So in that case, we can specify the category according to a requirement. Along with that, we will be specifying the page as 1 to get the one page only. So this is also a get request. Now when we click on send, we will get to see the response. And in this case, the wallpapers are basically filtered on the for the nature category specifically. So we will also validate the response for this as well. The format of the response will be similar for both the APIs. Only the difference is that in the first APIs, the images are not filtered, and in the second API response, the images are filtered on the basis of search query. So in the second response, the images are filtered on the basis of nature query. So we will also take a look at the image which is filtered on the basis of nature category. So this is the image related to the nature. Similarly, other images will be related to the nature category as well. So in this way, we will be using these two APIs within our application to fetch the data from the Pixels website. Now, one more thing comes that how these APIs are getting validated or authorized. So in our API calls, there is a section called header. Inside the header, we have to add the authorization and we have to pass our authorization key. So this authorization key which we have generated, we have to pass it here. Only after that we will get the proper response. For example, if I will remove this authorization key and then we'll make an API call, then it will give us a response as 401 unauthorized, which means that the authorization is not provided for our API, and it will not return Pixel is not able to authorize us. So in that case, we will be getting the message as unauthorized. And when we add the proper authorization, then we will get the proper response. Similarly, in case of params as well, if we are not providing any proper parameter, in that case also we will not get the response. So for per page, if we pass the category as null, so in that case we will have a look what response we will get. So it will give us a message as 400 bad requests, which means that there is no query parameter present in the request, and it will not return us the response. So in this way, we have to validate uh, Pixels will validate the query parameters, and accordingly it will respond. So while making the request, we have to make sure that we are passing the proper parameters and we are properly validating the API calls. So that's it, guys. If you are having any doubts regarding this, then you can add a comment and I will have a look at the same. Thank you guys for joining this session. In the next session, we will be start creating your new Android Studio project, and inside that we will be creating the application. So firstly, we will be creating the recycler view. Then we will be creating our project, and I will be introducing you through the various file structures, which files which we are using with for creating the project, and how we will be making the API calls and displaying wallpapers within our application. So that we will be going to see in the next session. So thanks for joining the stream. Thank you.